isn't ready yet. I need to get closer. I can't cast that yet.
To a best of 3 series of professional StarCraft 2. Today it's time for a Zerg versus Zerg, where in game number 1 we find ourselves on Lightshade. So spotting here in the top left-hand corner, playing with the blue Zerg drones from Ukraine. And actually, speaking of drones, he's not making any new ones. So apparently the man is starting off this series with a spawning pool of 12 supply. We have none other than Bly. Whoa, that unintentionally rhymed. Literal Eminem over here, his opponent. In the opposite corner, playing with the red Zerg drones from Germany, we have none other than Lambo.
That's still recharging.
Now, I'm a big fan of both of these players for the exact opposite reason. So, at the very least, Lambo always strikes me as a guy who plays the game very calculatedly, very efficiently. He runs the, the tests over and over and over again to make sure that what he's doing is the best way of doing it. Right? Now, he does cheese from time to time, but definitely not as much as Bly. So, Bly, generally speaking,
I can't cast that.
he likes to mix it in at least a couple of times in the series. Right? So, personally, I play a lot more like Lambo, I suppose. I try to just grind out the games. Bly always seems a little bit more free-flowing. Either way, he's already got 6 Zerglings coming up right now. There is a drone on the other side of the map as well, so I guess he plans on building like a spine crawler inside of his opponent's main base? No! Really?
I need to get
this is
closer.
something I haven't seen in a long time. Now, I'm pretty sure this is... I'm actually gonna back off. I'm pretty sure that little bit of vision right there was just a observer glitch. Because there's no way he saw that, right? Unless he built the hatchery too close, but that'd be kind of dumb. Yeah, so this is what Lambo actually sees in the game. And at this point, yeah, the hatch has already been cast. Okay, so the little graphic we saw just now was indeed just a... an observer error right there. Lambo has no idea that a spine crawler is currently building inside of his natural expansion. So if you're fast enough, you build a hatch, you cancel the hatch, you're gonna end up... Oh, he's even running the Zerglings right now around the Overlord. So Lambo's not gonna find out about this until very late.
I can't.
Normally he'd be saving up Larva right now, but he's gonna go 21 Overlord.
Oh no.
So if you cancel the hatchery, there's a little bit of creep left over, and if you're fast enough, you can actually start up a spine. So at this point, I mean, he sees a couple of links right now, I guess, with this OV. At this point, maybe Lambo could start saving up a little bit here, but now that he's seen the spine crawler... This is already what I'm talking about. This is a build that was around for some time, a very long time ago. It's literally scouted just by leaving the Overlord around for a little bit longer, so you can see that a spine is coming up. Not something that we've seen in a very long time. Anyways, even a Zergling right there ends up getting surrounded. Broodlings obviously will spawn out of that hatchery as it gets killed. Drones are pulled away. It looks like the Broodlings will be able to finish off that spine crawler. A couple of drones have fallen down, or fallen at this point, though. Okay, so hatchery has been started here by Bly. Obviously, there's no gas here for the blue Zerg player. Link speed is coming up already for Lambo. He's pulled all the drones out of gas. Honestly, just going for a link flood right now, I think is the best way, right? Because, I mean, you can try and go for an expo here, but already there's a significant advantage right now for Bly. Yeah, I guess the main thing that Lambo has going for himself right now is the fact that he's got a queen out quickly. So he's already got larva here, I guess, coming up inside of that hatchery. Plus, he's got a tech advantage, right? So he's got that link speed just about to finish up. He is adding on a couple of workers here, but I honestly feel like making links here may just be the better choice. Bly does have a queen right here at the front too. Apparently Lambo took some damage right here on the OV. Honestly, losing this Overlord, pretty sure. Oh my god. Well, I was going to say, if he would have lost it for free earlier, that would be game over. This is really, really bad right now for Lambo. Yeah, he's once again stuck at 22 out of 22 supply. That being said, I don't think actually... Has he... No, he should have seen these Zerglings leave. Well, he sees them right now for sure. 3 queens right now at the front. Lambo, though, yep, decides to just pass them by and go into the main base. He'll see that his opponent has started mining a little bit of gas here, but since there's no creep connecting the main and the natural expansion, it's going to take those queens forever. At the same time, all right, couple of Zerglings, slow Zerglings that is, made their way to the other side of the map again as well, and that means that the queen over here also falls. I think Bly's trying really hard to throw this game right now. I'm not entirely sure how he managed to even get to this position. Obviously, what you want to do is put up a couple of structures and then put the queens in the middle of it, so these Zerglings can never go into the main base in the first place. But now all of a sudden, yep, this is what I mean. Now we have ourselves a game. Okay, well, you do need to finish up the wall off in time. Bly only mined 32 gas, so it's not like he's really going to be able to defend this here with his own Zerglings eventually. As a matter of fact, he's mostly just been droning here during all of this to make sure that... yeah, any worker losses right here, I guess, get nullified a little bit. While the queens eventually clean all of this up. One of the Evo chambers gets cancelled right here. Replaced with a roach ward. 1 hex right here to the left. All right. So I heard that this series is a lot of fun. It's from one of the recent awardee events. Apparently, yeah, this series is a really good one. And I already see why that is, huh? Going for a proxy hatchery into hatchery cancel only to then make a spine crawler, that's something we don't really see anymore. Okay. Eventually, the link control right here is given up on. Lambo has decided to plant down his 3rd hatchery. Obviously, he's going to be the one that will have map control for a little while longer, so I can't really blame him. But already, Bly right now has got himself the +1 missile coming. So he decided to skip the link speed entirely and just go straight for the roach tech. Can't really blame him. +1 missile, absolutely huge, of course. He's going to do the switcheroo right here. A high energy queen in the back, so he's got a little bit of energy for transfusion. +1 missile is really strong because it can 2-shot unupgraded Zerglings. So if you make a roach right, normally it takes 3 shots to kill a Zergling with +1 missile against unupgraded Zerglings without any carapace upgrade. It's going to take them all of a sudden 2 shots, you know, after you finish up that upgrade. Anyways. Lambo made a video some time ago about a 30 drone all-in. Where you bring the queens and everything too. Although you would go for a lair. I thought for a second here that's what Bly is going for. I mean, he's adding on a lot of queens. He's got quite a few of them. So basically in that video, he went really quick lair. He went for like an Overlord creep highway. I love that build. It's one of the strongest ones that you can go for, especially on smaller maps. Unless Bly is anticipating a bunch of like... No, I think he is sending the queens, yeah. Unless Bly is like anticipating a bunch of...
It's too far away.
A bunch of like mutas to show, but there's no way. No, it's way too early for mutas. He's got 5 queens. Lair is coming right now. Okay, here come the roaches. +1 missile though. It's got a shot significantly before the one of Lambo. So Lambo was adding on a couple more drones here as well into the 3rd base, but yeah, adding on the spines here makes a lot of sense. A couple of links going around the back. They probably want to try and see if they can surround the Zerglings and waste some of that transfusion energy. But at the same time, the roaches right here off Bly have already made their way towards the other side of the map. +1 missile is done, so those Zerglings get picked off way easier. And obviously, the roaches of Lambo are also taking additional damage. Queens here on the low ground, I mean, they get just killed very easily. There are 2 spines, but at this point, yeah, just go for the natural. What a chaotic game of ZVZ. What a mess. That's where Bly shines though, right? I've casted so many Bly games over the years. Even though I don't think this is the ideal way of playing Zerg, because it's going to be very hard to take down the top of the line guys. I mean, Lembo is one of the very best, right? And it seems to be working against him, but it's just insane what the man pulls off in these matches. I mean, we're seeing a ZVZ right now where the queens are on the other side of the map. That would be cast worthy for like many players out there already, right? Like that is something we don't see in Zerg versus Zerg. And even though he gets cleaned up over here, the supply count isn't lying. But obviously in this game, he even started off with a proxy hatchery and then into a spine crawler. Like it's kind of impossible if you're a fan of StarCraft 2 to not, you know, be a fan of Bly, right? Like come on. That was so sick.
I can't cast.
This is game over, right? There's no way. Yeah, GG is cold. Okay, and Bly wins game number 1. Alrighty, game number 2 takes place on Oxide. And actually, once again, Bly is not AFK, okay? He's here. He's mining the close-by mineral patches. He's just once more saving up resources to get a spawning pool out as quickly as possible. Alright, 2 for 2 when it comes to going for the 12 pool. I don't think he can pull off that same trick once again that Bly went for in the previous game. Because, I mean, assuming here that Lambo goes hedge first, which, by the way, if this is like any kind of pool first variant here from Lambo, he hard shuts this down. Like, it's just an insta-win for him, pretty much. I mean, then he's going to be able to produce Zerglings when he sees his opponent, like, running across the map right away. No, okay, so he's once again going to go hedge first. On this map, can you... Maybe you can kind of squeeze a hatch over here and then still... Yeah, I guess you can still pull it off, but... Obviously, because of the ramp leading up here, it's going to be a little bit harder to manage that. Either way, Bly is not even sending a drone across. It's just going to be a couple of overlords for the time being. He's going to be able to produce Zerglings right now. What's the follow-up? He's selecting drones. Okay. He's got... You see the little circle right there? That means that Bly has hotkeyed right now those workers. Yeah. I think he's pulling the boys. Yep. So 3 drones will remain at home to continue mining for a little while longer. This means that Bly is going for another all-in. This time around, he's definitely planning on building more than 1 spine crawler. So the standard is to build 3 spines on your opponent's creep. Look at the way that he's microing this as well. Skipping that very first overlord, although Lambo right here with the second OV is going to scout that this is indeed incoming at this point. Already, he's starting up whatever he can. So this is the most likely location for spines to come up. He's already hiding 1 drone in the natural expansion as well. So Lambo is very calculated with his approach. Pretty sure he knows exactly what to do, but this is, for all intents and purposes, as close to a build or a loss that you can get to. He does start up a spine right here in the net, okay? Obviously, he had 2 drones on idle there for a little while. He's going to be able to produce his own queens and his own Zerglings right now. Spines are coming up. If these spines finish up, I'm pretty sure that's mostly game over, I want to say. If he defends this, though, with minimal drone losses, this should still be very playable. I mean, obviously, like, this is a complete all-in here from Bly, right? Oh my god. Well, there's a lot of blue drones going down right now. The ones in red are also slowly falling. This spine over here is nice because he can send the drones down towards the low ground to mine over there instead. But isn't this spine in the main base in range? Like, isn't this... Yeah. Oh my god. Oh my god. I mean, there's only a handful of workers remaining at home, right? Bly even added on a 4th spine here as well. Spawning pool right now is gone. There's 5 spines here for Bly. What is this then? So he's forcing the drones to mine the mineral patches right here at the bottom of the natural expo. So that's clever. Yeah, if they go to the top ones, they're going to be in range right here of the spine crawlers in the main. So I don't think that's what you want to pull off. Lambo, in the meantime, sending a couple of his own Zerglings on the towards the other side of the map. Now sends them back home, knowing that his opponent knows, because he needs them actually at home, since the spine crawlers apparently were looped up right there in Vaseline and grease or whatever, because somehow, some way, they managed to come down the ramp. Obviously, they take like 10 seconds to burrow, so there's a lot. Look at these games. Some people think ZVZ is boring. Well, not when Bly is playing, at the very least. What is going on right now? It's a spine crawler battle. There were 5 spines here earlier for Bly. 2 only remain. He's gonna try and actually now burrow one of them right here in the back of the natural expansion to prevent mining. But I guess this is now an advantage here eventually for our German Zerg. Okay. I mean, there's still, like, you gotta be careful. There's still... No, there's no way, right? He's actually uprooting the spines right now, though. Yeah, he's gotta be very careful. There's still 4 lings over here. My god, what a mess. Keep in mind, Lambo doesn't have a spawning pool, right? So he can't make any more Zerglings. He needs to make a new pool. Well, apparently there was a little bit of a pause over here. That spine right now is in range of the hedge. He's gonna leapfrog the spine crawlers? I guess? I mean, but at that point, this man is gonna start, you know, poking first. Look at this, yeah. He's slow pushing the spines once again. This should be a hold eventually, right? Okay, there we go. Flies microing this spine crawler on his opponent's screen. Pretty sure this is a loss, but in the meantime, he is droning. You know what? Fly is droning. Okay. Alright. A lot of lost mining time here as well for Lambo. Even though it's 13 versus 9 workers, Fly is kind of evening this all up. He's got a tech advantage, I suppose, in the form of a spine crawler, so he does start up a queen right now, too. Lambo does have a second base still available. I'm not entirely sure, though, for how long. Fantastic. Alright, one of the spies is gonna go into the main base to try and save the hatch. Drone's now pulled as well. Yeah, he wants to keep this hatch alive really badly. Alright. Okay. Lambo's still paying attention. Sends the OV away from the opponent's main base. Very critical, actually. I mean, the queen might still try and hunt it down, though. Oh my god. This is so sick. I feel like playing against Bly has to be one of the worst things ever. Like, especially if you're already having a bit of a tough day and then you're like looking at the tournament bracket and you're like, oh god, I gotta go up against Bly. I'm pretty sure that's what happens, right? You're like, oh my, not again. He's gonna play these mental gymnastics with me where I never know what to expect. I love watching Bly. Oh, there you go. Oh, well, never mind. A little bit of drone drilling once again. And in the end, 6.5 minutes into the game, it's a slight advantage for Lambo, but really not that much. Yeah, it's it is an advantage here for the German player, but I'm just thinking, right? Like Lambo is one of the, you know, 7k MMR guys, right? Like he's one of the, well, I don't know what his MMR is at right now. I can actually have a quick little look. SC2 revealed is pretty good for that sort of thing. And, quickly figure out, like SC2revealed.com. So Lambo is currently sitting with one of his accounts at 6,859 MMR, and his peak MMR was actually 7,000 MMR on the dot. This was back in April. 7,000 MMR, like it's like it's one of the amounts that is basically only reached by like a dozen people, like in the history of StarCraft 2. So Lambo is one of the very best, right? My point is that if this was probably you or me playing against Bly, unless like you're watching this and your name starts with an S and ends with Errol, or it begins with an R and ends with Anor, right? Like, unless those are the people that watch my videos, we'd probably all be dead. Like Bly would absolutely demolish us. So if you're ever thinking, and I fall into this trap every once in a while, that the ladder can be like kind of like quote unquote boring because there's only one quote unquote best way of playing. You look at Bly over here and he pulls off these crazy things against some of the best players on the planet. Anyways, rant disabled, but like it's one of the reasons why I do like watching Bly as well. Because like, for example, Zerg versus Protoss right now, it's a bit of a boring matchup, right? It's pretty much always the same opener, as I've discussed many times before as to why that is. It can just be a little bit plain.
I can't cast that yet.
But then maybe if you watch a couple of the games right here from Bly, you might feel inspired and realize, okay, wait a second, this is also I don't know what he's doing in ZB, right? But it's just an example. Bly did make a lot of links here as well. He's got some banelings too on the other side of the map. I guess this is designed to now kill the opponent's third. The problem is that while this is all happening, Lambo is happily expanding and stuff with like the worker count. So he's got +1 missile coming up. He's going to be able to go for roaches. And now we're talking 42 drones right here for Lambo, going up against 32 for Bly. Is he? No, you can't. What? No way. Okay. I was going to say, there's still 2 spines remaining. These spines, they have stories to tell, man. 8 and 7 kills respectively. Some of those were drones. Don't ask them. It's confusing, okay? It's a complex thing. Either way, right now, we're kind of in a situation that we saw Bly in the previous game, where Lambo's got 1-1 even coming up right now. He does have a lair already done. He's got roach speed about halfway done as well. I've got a feeling he's going to be able to go for an absolute killer of a timing attack. With roaches, with +1 missile and +1, I guess Carapace will be a little bit behind, but he's going to be able to go for a killer push, just with a lot of roaches. Just the classical 1-1 roach speed attack, right? The one that we've all seen a million times. And I don't really know exactly how Bly is planning on holding it. I mean, he does have his own lair finishing up.
What can I do?
Hello. He does have his own lair finishing up. He's gonna go for the 4th gas right now too. So maybe he can like... There's no way he's gonna be able to get a Spire out. Right? He starts at 1-1 here as well for the... I guess he is gonna go Spire. It's the only thing that makes sense if you're gonna go 4 gases while making Ling Bane. Yeah, there it is. I mean, unless Lambo doesn't push here relatively soon. Why is Lambo... Yeah, unless Lambo is kind of just sitting back here. He's just waiting for reinforcements. Okay, it's a bit of an anti-timing, but yeah, he is going to go for a push. I thought for a second he was just going to sit back and give his opponent all of the time in the world to go for that Spire. Now, he's going to go for a move out right now. 1-1 on the Zerglings would make this push way easier. And Bly apparently is planning on just blowing up the roaches altogether, which I guess is one solution to his problem. The issue is, though, if you make this many Banelings, obviously you don't have a whole lot of gas to make mutas anymore. So even if the Spire finishes up right now, it's not going to be easy. With +1 melee done, these Banes would deal significantly more damage. Already. Did Lambo scout it? Nah, he didn't scout it, but I guess he knew. Or you can, like, you know, you can figure it out. He hasn't seen any roaches here from his opponent.
Well, then.
He knows that it has to be a muta transition, pretty much. Although he's going up against Bly, so, you know. Maybe he's just going to go pure Ling Bane, man. I don't know either. Look at how cautiously Lambo is playing this game. Hold up. Take a look, Terran players. This is how it's done. Splitting Marines against Banelings? Yeah, there you go. These units don't even have Stimpak. I guess the Banes didn't have, you know, the roly-poly upgrade. Okay, so 7 mutas are coming up right now. Bly's going for a multi-layered Wolof, I guess. The problem is, guys, these roaches, they have +1 carapace. And mutas are kind of like sentries when they're attacking roaches here. They're gonna be decent, but yeah. Eventually, they will theoretically clean this up, but there's no way. Absolutely no way. GG is cold. Okay, game number 3 is on 2000 Atmos, and we have 3 for 3. No way! Bly. Bly. For real? Okay. 3rd game in a row. 3rd game. With a 12 pool. We've seen some variety, though, in the 12 pool. If Lambo, by the way, once again, would just open up with a pool first, this would not be an issue. The problem is that Hatch First is quite a bit better. And, yeah, like, that is assuming you micro everything perfectly, right? Hatch First is definitely a little bit better. It's just that it might not be against Bly. Like, even if statistically... Like, Bly has been playing a lot of macro too, though, so maybe that's the issue. Maybe Bly does this when he goes up against a player who's, like, theoretically higher ranked than him? I don't know, man. Anyways, I think we have I think this is what he did in game number 1, right? Lembo. Oh my god. Oh my god, that drone. So he starts up the hatch at about 120. Lembo has no idea. Cancels the hatch and once again builds a spine crawler. This is so silly. So once again, these Zerglings are not taking the most obvious route towards the other side of the map, but they're purposefully dodging the optimized route right here for this Overlord. So one change that Lembo could also make is like change the routing of this OV to like the quote-unquote inefficient direction, just to try and you know.
Isn't ready yet.
Anyways. He's seen it now. Okay, so he has had a little bit of time to think about this as well. He's pulling a lot more workers this time around. So, obviously this is a 12 spawning pool, right? So there's not that many drones on the other side of the map. Spine will just get killed here by a bunch of drones, and I guess it already bled out by being off creep for quite some time. Is this good though for Lembo? I don't think it is. I mean, he did that very confidently, so I was thinking that might be the best way of doing it, but... we're talking now... 8 workers remaining right here. No, that's not it. No.
Jeg kan bruge det i...
It feels to me like Lembo is trying to solve this puzzle on the fly, and he's like, okay, I think this is the solution, but that wasn't it, man. Because right now, Bly has got himself a very nice lead. A couple of Zerglings here sneaking away as well. He knows that there's a few drones that are very low on hit points. He's going to try and kill those. Not happening. Look at the Zergling over here. Oh, yeah, yeah. It's going to the surface of 2,000 Atmos. I think weaker players would always lose their first OV here as well. I think Lembo should still be able to get it out, but I can 100%, while I'm like panicking over here on my natural expansion, I can imagine I forget my OV. I mean, maybe Lembo actually had that same thing happen here as well. This sucks. This really sucks. Ay, ay, ay. Even the drone right there stays alive. Oh my god. This is a salt inducer of a game right here. I can almost feel Lembo's frustration here. I know he gets like very tilted about these sort of things, and I can imagine, you know, as to why that is.
It's still
All right. Well, StarCraft 2 is very much so a mental game. Link speed is about to finish, but this time around, yeah. Bly is repositioning the queens. So this time around, it's not like these units are just going to be able to run into the natural and you know, go into the main base.
90.
Okay.
Suck at it.
This map also allows you to wall off quite a bit easier. He's once again skipping the link speed, I guess, right? Okay, can he get a drone? There you go. Ugh, 1 drone, 2 drones, 3 drones? Yeah, 3 drones, okay. So that's actually pretty good, all things considered. At least that makes that link speed not entirely pointless. So now we're kind of catching up here as the blue Zerg in the work account, but I feel like Bly is still feeling pretty comfortable here. Yeah, he's going for the lair right now. He's going to go for an additional gas guy so he can go +1 missile, which I think he wants to go for. Although, maybe not? I don't know. Oh no, he did go link speed just now, huh? Alright. So he's going link speed with a very... Oh, I guess this is a Spire play then? It has to be Spire. Yeah, he's going +1 melee. Okay, yep. So it has to be Spire, because otherwise I don't think he would go for this. So right now, ooh, Lembo scouts it. This is once again a mind game here from Bly. So in game number 1, he followed this up with roaches. Right now, Lembo like scouts the front. He sees the Evo chamber is researching. He double checks right now to see if the upgrade gets cancelled. But he obviously doesn't see what upgrade is researching in here, right? So he may very well assume. Yep, there it is. That it's gonna once again be roaches. Now this is a quick Spire. Lair's only just starting here for Lembo. He does have a roach warren, but like I think he's gonna go 3rd hatch and just macro his way out of this. In ZVZ, whenever like it's roaches versus mutas, I will pretty much automatically favor the player that is going for the mutas, just because mutas are easier to play. Like, it's not that roaches can't be good, it's just that like you pretty much always see the muta player win below like, you know, the tippity top of the skill level. Now, Lambo could definitely play Roach Ravager into Hydra, Lurker, Viper, and all that, right? Over the course of like the next 20 minutes. But the margin for error there is so small.
There. Have a good one.
Anyways, he's one of the few Zergs that could definitely pull it off, though. He's saving up a lot of Zerglings right now. He's got the 3rd hatch here. No roaches has been shown or not a single roach has been shown here, right? So Bly even started up the roach speed upgrade too. I think he plans on canceling that when the Spire finishes. He probably does plan on canceling that. Does he? Maybe not. Yeah, he canceled it. Okay. So he was saving up money right there to go for Mutalisks, obviously, as quickly as possible. And at this point, it's scouted. He's canceling the Roach Rod. I mean, he had money in the bank. May as well sort of Roach speed just to, like, you know, make your opponent see. At this point, obviously, Lambo is scouting for such things. Make the opponent think that it's going to be a Roach transition. And then all of a sudden, you whip out the trap card, right? You go for the... You go for the Mutas. Okay, so then the 3rd hatch dies. Bly right now is his own 3rd hatch. He's going to be able to continue going here. And there's a big difference in this game compared to the previous one. Now the Mutas are already out before the Roaches get to the other side of the map, right? They don't have... Oh, no. They don't have +1 Carapace here either. So Bly's going to have, like, I don't know, 15 Mutas out by the time that Lambo can think about sending the Roaches across. And that is an absolute disaster. Okay. So what does Lambo go for? He goes for the Burrow upgrade as well as the Tunneling Claws. So this is going to allow him to tunnel the Roaches towards the other side of the map. But I mean, there's already an Overseer. Like, this Overseer is waiting for it. Yeah, I don't see it happening. One additional thing you can also do here if you're Lambo is try and go for like a Nidus network and get the queens towards the other side of the map quickly. But other than that, like this is going to be very difficult to play. This is Lambo, like if he's just going to plan... So basically he's planning on just dealing some damage with tunneling clawed roaches to the other side of the map. And he's trying to play the long game, right? So this is him basically preparing for a 20+ minute slugfest of ZVZ. Bly also preparing for that though, already grabs the 4th. The problem with roaches, right, with tunneling claws is that like their actual skin changes. So like you can see little spikes on their bodies. So even if Bly doesn't pick up on this, like look at the spikes, there they are. Bly should know at this point. So see, like the roaches right now are needed for defending, and at this point he knows what's up, right? He should know what's up anyway. He didn't see the roaches leave, but oh well, he did actually. Oh man.
Well met.
Yeah, this is a tough one for Lambo. This is very tough.
Go with honor.
For what it's worth, if Lambo happens to be watching this video, I did cast the ZVZ against Cyril from not too long ago. That was a good one. Like the series that he played against Cyril not too long ago. But my God, this is painful. GG is cold. Fantastic series right here.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Tonight we're debating whether or not we should affirm trans identities, and we are starting right now with Sean's opening statement. Thanks so much for being with us, Sean. The floor is all yours.
Need help? Go with honor, friend.
All right, so I'll just go into it. So the way I view this partly is just from the perspective of a more general question about which desires we should and should not pursue. You could characterize people who have gender dysphoria or transgender people as people who have a certain desire to, in some sense, manifest a gender identity that is discordant with the one they were assigned at birth based on their sex. And we need a general criteria for deciding which desires we should and should not pursue. I think we also need, and it's a related criteria about which behaviors we should and should not socially stigmatize. There are a lot of values you could base that criteria on, but I think sort of the most universal one to base it on is the reduction of human suffering and the promotion of well-being and the like, because it's just so universally held as a value. And it's tricky to look at the transgender issue because obviously we don't have sort of the gold standard of scientific evidence with respect to transgenderism. You can't randomly assign someone to do almost anything relevant to the trans question. You can't randomly assign them to have gender reassignment type surgery. Obviously, you can't randomly assign them to have gender dysphoria in the first place. But nonetheless, the data, to me anyway, looks pretty consistent with a picture of saying that leaning into the desire is probably not a good thing. That if you, and I say this because, for instance, you look at the rate of suicide attempts, and they tend to be higher among those trans people who have socially transitioned, who have medically transitioned, and the like. And so you might, on that basis, think that it's not a good thing for them to lean into, like I said. And that's probably the most important thing to say. There are other things to say as well, because you might say, okay, even if it is a bad decision for them, why is that our business? Why should we particularly care? We're not just talking about whether or not individuals should lean into that desire or try to find some way out of it. We're also more fundamentally talking about whether or not we should affirm their identities and their choices. And I think there are a few things to say about that. I mean, in the first place, obviously, if you care about their well-being, then you want to discourage choices that are contrary to their well-being. But then in the second place, there's the issue of whether or not the societal affirming of transgender identities has caused an increase in the number of people who are experiencing gender dysphoria, identify as transgender. And once again, the scientific evidence here is not very good, but the data certainly is not inconsistent with the view that that is occurring. And if that's occurring, and that's a condition which massively increases, say, the rate of suicide attempt among people, then that's, I think, quite a good reason to not affirm them. And then the final thing to say, the final sort of point I'll make in this opening is that because the desire the transgender people have isn't just about themselves, it's also about other people. And what I mean by that, right, is that, so for me to be a woman in the sense that transgender people want to be a woman involves other people interacting with me in certain ways. They also consider me to be, in some respect, interchangeable with women gender.
That spell isn't ready yet. That's still recharging.
In certain contexts especially, there's certain contexts for which is not particularly true, certain contexts where we're kind of talking about something very small like the use of pronouns, but when we talk about something like the legitimacy of two people having a serious physical altercation with each other or mate selection or something like that, those are the sorts of contexts where cisgendered people, I think by and large, would feel a significant degree of psychological discomfort in trying to treat trans people the way that many of them are treated. And so that's yet another reason to not lean into those sorts of ideas. So those are sort of the basic three things I tend to think about. That wasn't like a pre-planned opening statement. That seemed kind of ranting off because it literally was.
Fuck the system.
Yeah.
Inventory is full.
You got it. Thank you very much for that opening statement. And want to let you know, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, we are a neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. And we hope you feel welcome no matter what walk of life you are from. And with that, we are going to kick it over to Xander Hall. Thanks so much for being with us. The floor is all yours for your opening as well.
Hell yeah, thank you. I hope you don't mind, but I wrote down some of the main points that you talked about there, just so we could I could go after them individually as all on their own. So yeah, the first thing that you brought up was that we need a criteria for desires we should and should not pursue, and what we should and should not stigmatize based on, broadly, I think you said, the reduction of human suffering. And to talk about that, we do have a criteria, I would argue, for what desires we should or should not pursue, what we think is okay, and what we think isn't okay. We already have these
I'm out of
standards.
range.
I'd say generally as a society, at least here in America, we have a pretty shared system of morality, even if there are a few differences there. I think we mostly all hold the same general values, and I think one of those values is generally that as long as you're not hurting anybody, you should be allowed to do whatever you want, as long as it's not really affecting others in a seriously impactful way that could actually harm them. And it shouldn't really be an issue. But I don't even want to take that route when it comes to defending the trans situation. I don't think that this is the right way to even go about arguing against it. Especially because you then went on to bring up the suicide attempts are higher among those who have transitioned. And this just isn't true. This just categorically is completely untrue. If you want me to cite you any studies that you can take a look at and read over and confirm that, I can absolutely do that. But I mean, the NHS and the has already classified gender dysphoria and the treatment for it as being transitioning, as being allowed and to pursue the transition that you want to, right?
I
that
can't
was
cast
the
that
outcome
yet.
of these studies. And then you also have rapid onset gender dysphoria. I'm not sure if you've heard that exact phrase, but basically, to summarize it, rapid onset gender dysphoria is the idea that, like, young people being around people who claim to be trans will make them want to mimic being trans in order to, like, get anything from attention or to feel special or to any variety of reasons people present. The study that I imagine you were referencing when talking about rapid onset gender dysphoria is one that I have seen many times in the past. A lot of people have brought it up, so I don't know if you've become aware of it. I know you haven't brought it up specifically, but I mean, a lot of people with your position have, so I'll acknowledge it. The study that you were referencing that argues that more people are becoming trans in order to sort of like blend in or whatever, the rapid onset gender dysphoria thing. I believe this was a study by
That's still
I have the
recharging.
link here. Basically,
I can't
the
cast
argument
that yet.
is that young people are identifying as trans at a higher rate when they are around other people who claim to be trans, or young people of their age that claim to be trans. And this, I believe, was actually like seriously debunked by the authors, particularly because it was just a study of parents. It was like an online poll on an already extremely biased like turf website for parents, not the children. So I don't know
Inventory
if
is
like
full.
we can suggest this massive problem of children developing gender dysphoria because of some placebo is real because of a parent poll online. Like I don't trust that. And then finally, the last thing that you brought up was that trans people's desires to interact with trans people desire others to
That
interact with
spell
them in a
isn't
certain
ready
way.
yet.
So yeah, basically,
That's still recharging.
yeah,
That spell
you're trans
isn't ready
and
yet.
you want to see your identity validated and you want people to recognize you that way, then you're going to expect others to do that. Now, does that mean that like that a trans person is the right to like eat someone to death because they refuse to use the right pronouns? No, but generally, I think we have certain standards of politeness in our society in which, as long as it's not going to literally kill you, we agree that being polite to others and referring to them how they prefer is how we do it, right? Like we do this with names. If someone's got a nickname that isn't the name they were given when they were born, that's not on their birth certificate, usually if we know it, we use it because it's polite.
Inventory
Gender
is
is on a
full.
whole nother level than that. Gender is way more
I need to
way
get
more
closer.
important people in their names. I think this is more of an argument in favor of just kind of being impolite than an argument against technology or the whole thing. But yeah, that's my response to your points.
You got it. With that, we are going to jump into open conversation and a couple of things. First, folks, I want to let you know our guests are linked in the description. We really do appreciate our guests. I want to encourage you to, as always, attack the argument instead of the person. And with that, I want to remind you as well, we are very excited. If you have not heard, folks, this is a big one. If you haven't heard, we're very excited that coming up In January, we're going to, for the first time, have our first ever modern day debate conference called DebateCon. That's going to be in person in Dallas, Texas. So stay tuned for more words on that, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, as we're going to have many more juicy debates both at that conference and remotely as usual. So thanks so much, gentlemen. The floor is all yours for that open dialogue. Glad you're here.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, so obviously in my opening, I sort of said a bunch of stuff, and then you responded in a list-like fashion to a bunch of those things. What we should probably do, right, is sort of do the first one first, then move to this, and just move down the list.
I can't cast that yet.
So the first thing that you responded to had to do with criteria for desires, and you had said something like that as long as what someone's doing isn't hurting anyone else, we should be okay with them doing it. Is that roughly?
No, broadly, I think that as long as if people have a preference for how they want to be treated or how they want to be referred to or how they want to live their lives, I think as long as they're not really hurting themselves or others, then I don't think that this is something that should have a moral panic started about it.
Okay, gotcha. Maybe I thought you had not said themselves.
It's too far away.
Before. Maybe I just misheard it. That's fine. Okay, so
I
I don't think we
misspoken.
actually.
I might have misspoken, but yeah.
So we probably don't actually disagree on that point. So talking about the suicide rate of people who have transitioned in various ways, medically or socially. Yeah, I don't know if we want to like throw studies at each other. I mean, there have been a fair number of studies, and it's a fairly consistent finding in the literature that transitioning both socially and medically leads to is not the right word, but predicts a higher level of suicidal attempt and ideation.
Mm-hmm. Do you know why that is?
Do I know? Well, firstly, before it seemed to me like you were saying that's not true. So you do agree that that is true?
Well, no, it's true that objectively speaking, the data suggests that trans people are more likely to engage in self-harm, have suicidal ideation, or commit suicide. But that's not because they're trans. It has to do with other factors, and we can talk about that.
Right, but so the point I'm making isn't just that trans people have elevated suicide attempts rate. It's that among trans people, those who have had various sorts of surgeries, or those who have socially transitioned so that the people in their lives, know on visual contact that they are transgender, that these trans people have higher suicide attempt rates than do trans people who have not done this, and that a plausible interpretation of that would be that, leaning into pursuing these desires seems to predict an even worse mental outcome than not pursuing.
You're talking about the PubMed study, right? The one by PubMed.
I mean, there are lots of studies on PubMed, but this is also, I'm not referring to
Well, on PubMed, there's a particular study, and I think it's the one that you're referring to. I've seen it before. It's for anybody who wants to know, like, what the argument made by the study and what the deal is. Basically, it's a long-term follow-up of transsexual persons undergoing sex reassignment surgery, and it's a cohort study in Sweden. The reason why I bring this study in particular up is because it's the one that I've seen the overwhelming majority of the times from people who've made this argument. And my main issue with it is I believe the author of the study themselves, they're Swedish, so the people who made it it's a Swedish study, so obviously language barrier was an issue for a while, but I believe they've come out and they've clarified that the control group for the post-transition trans individuals to be compared to were cisgendered people. It wasn't trans people being compared, people who have transitioned that are trans being compared to trans people who haven't transitioned. It was trans people who've transitioned compared to non-trans people, which I'd be willing to bet the overwhelming majority of the time, trans people are going to have a higher suicide rate than cis people, as long as trans people are treated the way that they are in society broadly.
Right. So, okay. So I know the study you're talking about, that is definitely not the research I was having in mind, exactly because of what you just said. That what I was talking about was research that compares trans people who have transitioned to trans people who have not. Whereas what you're talking about is a famous study out of Sweden that compared trans people who had transitioned to just a match, in some respect, matched group of cisgender people, which I agree is not very informative for this question.
Oh, well, then in that case, if you've got another study that makes this like that posits this that you want to send to me, like we don't even have to go over it on stream. I'm just genuinely curious to see if you've got like another study that claims this, because I'll look it over and I'll give it a look over. Absolutely.
Yeah, so this is a little dated, but back in 2019, I tried to figure this out. I have a table that I think has like 9 effect sizes for medical transitioning and 6 for social transitioning. So it's definitely not based on a single study. And that is obviously I cannot send. I mean, I could send you, but you cannot read 15 studies.
Oh yeah, it's not exactly practical to do on stream. But legitimately though, I'd actually like if you'd send it to me, like for me to look at after the debate off stream, because if this study does claim what it claims that you're claiming, I want to see it. Yeah. So you are of the opinion that, okay, why do you think that trans people have a higher suicide rate than cis people? Or why do you think trans people who have transitioned have a higher suicide rate than trans people who haven't?
Or the Alliance.
Right. So I think there's it's a combination of many different reasons. So one of them, and the one that probably I would guess you would want to talk the most about, stereotypically leftists want to talk the most about, is victimization from social ostracism increasing, and physical ostracism for that matter, physical violence, increasing their suicide attempt rate. And I think that plays a role in it, but it's a fairly minor role, that the majority of it cannot be explained by victimization from the sorts of discrimination often cited. I mean, I could talk more, but I think that's probably a good place to stop and get your reaction to it.
I mean, there's like a collection of studies that I could bring up that have to do with like LGBT people, especially LGBT youth in particular. This is where it's like a particularly large problem, because LGBT youth, or youth in general, children, are more reliant on those in their lives. They can't really just operate without any safety net or any other people in their lives to give them a boost. They're fucking children. I believe it's something like nearly 70% of LGBT youth, or almost 80% if they're in the closet, but nearly 70% of LGBTQ youth have said that their parents are completely open with like homophobic or anti-LGBT rhetoric around them. And I believe there was also a study that claimed that like only if, I believe it's for trans people and their suicide rate, I believe there's this, it's a massive drop in suicidality with just a trans person's family approval. Not even like friends in the broader society, just with family approval. I believe the suicide rate of trans people on average just drops massively. I can do a quick search to see if I can tell you exactly the number, but I remember reading it and being like, wow, that's a big number.
Yes, I guess I would. There are a few things to say.
Yes.
In the first place, the way that I've looked at this before is to
Det
look
bliver
at
sick as fuck.
Well, so the first question we would want to ask is, how big of an effect on suicide does
Efter skal saftes bajer.
how big of an effect is it that it has on these? And
Jeg glæder mig til at se, hvor dyre bajerne er i Royal Arena. Er det ikke sådan 60 kroner for en bajer? Vil det ikke være sådan en rimelig... vil det ikke være sådan en rimelig standard på sådan et sted? God damn, det bliver 3 dyre dage.
A higher rate of suicide might say experiencing quite a lot, double or even triple your rate of suicide attempt. That this cannot explain something like trans people having such a suicide rate of cisgender people. Now, another thing I want to bring up though is that it's very hard.
Blast Fortfejlet. Det bliver så fucking fedt. Jeg glæder mig. Jeg har været sådan lidt med løbet af ugen. Men nu var det faktisk i dag. Og de næste 2 dage, så glæder jeg mig faktisk rigtig meget.
So I'm not arguing that it's specifically victimization or active hatred for LGBT people or trans people
mad og drikke.
That causes
en gourmet hotdog.
I think it has to do with a lack of support. At least when it comes to most, and I know this isn't something that can actually be tracked through data. It's impossible to track the sentiment.
Jeg skal ikke have en gourmet hotdog. Jeg skal have sådan en rigtig slave hotdog.
I feel like it's fairly safe to do so here. At least most trans people that I've talked to, where they just get like, I've had these calls with people that'll go on till like 2 a.m. and just getting really deep talking with people about how they feel. And I'll just do this in private when I'm hanging out with people and I'm not streaming. And I've talked to quite a few trans people about this, and a big part of it just has to do with the lack of support. Most
Der
people
er intet om
who are
pris her.
trans, or most people
Og
broadly
du kan
don't
få
really
en
know
stor
that much about
0,7
trans
liter
people.
Royal
They start
økologisk
experiencing
pilsner.
gender, dysphoria and whatnot. They don't really understand what it is, right?
Og så kan du selvfølgelig også få Heineken.
Experience it don't,
Jeg vil ikke være mørk
especially if
mumme
they're
og
young. And so that lack of support, that lack
mørk
of
mumme.
knowledge and that support base to help them understand what they're feeling, that I think that probably plays a much larger part in
Og det er en mørk øl.
most people would account for. And then, of course, there's the
6,5.
obvious. There's the fact that like I think it's nearly 50 or 40% of homeless youth are LGBT.
Dude, jeg troede lige, der stod her på Sjøbæk.dk, at den koster 264 kroner. Det var 15. 15 gange en halv liter, men jeg troede lige, at en koster 264. Så skal det sagtens være en god øl.
Non-LGBT people than some other innate thing we could point to, because I haven't seen any evidence that there's another innate
15 gange 50, så koster de
suicide rate and there's suicidal ideation than
lidt under
getting
20
shit
normalt.
broadly as a demographic all the time.
Sure. So yeah, it's definitely true.
De koster nok 30 i Royal Arena.
These are not the
Det er
same
ikke så
thing.
galt.
But there's a lot of research specifically on the relationship between.
Der har vi også en glasflaske, vi kan kaste med, hvis vi bliver rigtig sure.
Support from friends, family, specifically from parents, etc. The effect that kind of support has on the suicide rate of trans people. Again, I mean, you can't. I can't send this to you to read this live, but I would say just that when I looked at it across 22 effect sizes, 70
Vi skal bare have 5 øl, you 5 me.
significant, and the vast majority of them gave very weak effect sizes. So again, and that's not to say necessarily that it has no effect, but if we're looking at something that normally isn't even statistically significant, and when it is normally has a weak effect size, that cannot make more than a small contribution to a group that has a nine-fold increase in suicide attempt rate.
Wait, do you mind if I ask? You don't have to send me like a link or anything. I'm just curious if you could read.
I'm gonna get some sweet stages,
cuz.
cuz.
Study a second ago that suggested.
Right up here, 55th Street.
What was that you just said again a second ago? Just repeat that.
About social support or about the board?
Hvorfor var han bare en karakter? Det er helt vildt. Slå mennesker er fascinerende.
Ask the question, does social support, whether that's again defined as peer support or family support, in a sample of just trans people, is it true that those trans people who say that they have good family support, good social support, etc., have lower suicide attempt rates? Looking at that association, that most of these studies produce effects that aren't statistically significant, and the effect sizes they're reporting generally are very small.
Okay, so if that's the case, then why do you think that
Okay, så er jeg tilbage, hvor jeg døde.
have a higher suicide rate than non-LGBT people?
Jeg er virkelig bagud på levelet.
Well, like I was saying, it's a combination of different things. So I do think that in the first place, social support not as much, but there's a certain kind of bullying which certainly does contribute.
Har du frokost eller hvad? Eller har du bare tidligt fri om fredag?
Majority of it. Another thing to mention is that a lot of people who have gender dysphoria had pre-existing psychological conditions before they had gender dysphoria, like depression and anxiety are very common ones. Those obviously contribute to an elevated suicide rate.
There you go.
But fundamentally, I think we have a large unexplained gap in the suicide rate that we don't exactly know the cause of. I can share my intuitive speculation about it, but I'm not sure. I mean, that's what it is, I should say from the outset. This is just a speculation of mine about it, and I've never had any kind of gender dysphoria, so I'm not in the best place to speculate about it. But if I had to speculate, I would imagine it might have to do with them not being able to, because the desire they're trying to satisfy, I think anyway, based on just talking to people and whatnot, to fully satisfy it would be extremely difficult and require action on the part of them and many, many other people. And so for that reason, it seems like inherently a kind of desire.
You got this, cuz.
The more you sort of get into it and think about it, the more that's going to cause you to be unhappy. But again, that is very much speculation on my part. The empirical nature of the data, I think, is just that there's an unexplained gap in suicide rates.
I don't think it's very well unexplained. I think that LGBT people are a group that are extremely more likely to face bullying, and I think that bullying probably plays a lot more of a part than I think you're willing to admit it does. I have no doubt in my mind. Obviously, you mentioned there
Tror
are
jeg,
a lot
tror
of
jeg ikke, de bliver glade for at
people
høre.
with pre-existing mental conditions that could be part of the problem there, or even the reason for the
True.
problem, right? Like depression and whatnot. And I
Big
think I
fucking
actually found. I may be wrong on this, but I swear I saw something like 2 months ago, maybe, that I think like acknowledges that, and a study that sort of like debunks like, oh, it's just pre-existing mental conditions. But the main response I'd have to that is that doesn't make any sense. How don't you think that maybe if LGBT people are at such a more likely rate to commit suicide, that massive gap that you say is unexplained, what else could possibly explain it? I know you said that we had speculation, but I'm really curious. What else could possibly explain that massive gap of suicidality between LGBT and non-LGBT people? Is the gay lifestyle like inherently something that's going to cause you to be unhappy? Is there anything like what do you think it is?
Okay, well, firstly, I want to make a very clear distinction that I'm just talking about transgender people and not LGBT people. Like the empirical data on homosexuality is a totally separate question than the data and what it says about transgender people. There's some similarities in what the data says, but there's also some dissimilarities, and so I wouldn't want to talk about those as a unified group.
Well, I mean, but here's
and my
the
political
thing, though.
position is the same.
But here's the thing, though, because when it comes to the whole trans topic, is there really not only two? I guess technically three if you really want to stretch it, but realistically, like two paths that we can really go down. Either it's trans people are in some way misled about their identity and the validity thereof. Like they're in the wrong. They may not mean to be in the wrong or whatever, but they're clearly just something's wrong with them, and we have to put them through some kind of therapy or something to make them get over it or to get to a better place. This is what I assume you would advocate for. If not, then feel free to interrupt me and tell me what you think would be the best option. But and that's usually the response that I hear, or to accept trans people and allow them to live their lives and respect them and everything. But this doesn't sound that different to me than the arguments that homophobes back in the 90s and before would make about gay people. Like back when it was like gay people were the big moral panic that everybody was talking about. These arguments remind me a lot of the arguments that I heard back in those days, or from back in those days.
Han får et screenshot her derhjemme.
But what I heard, like the arguments I've heard from those days, it sounds like glaringly similar to me.
Sure. They might be similar at like the narrative level, right? But the interesting question is
what
the data says in both cases. And if the data doesn't say the same thing in both cases, I mean, that's what I care about. And if that's dissimilar, then they're just not. I wouldn't treat them the same.
Wait, so if the data,
right, like if you say,
what the fuck are you doing?
No, actually, I won't make that analogy because never mind. Just go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Well, if the data suggested that being gay made you more likely to be suicidal, like if the data just full on said, yep, having sex with other men when you're a man makes you more likely to kill yourself, would you advocate for like conversion therapy for gay people?
Well, there are a few things.
Faktisk et godt spørgsmål.
I definitely wouldn't encourage us to have any set of social norms that might increase either how gay people are, and that's a kind of weird thing to talk about. Some people do view sexuality that way. Whatever, I'll just say that. Increase how gay people are or the number of gay people. While that was true, yeah, I think that would be a very irresponsible set of social norms to have. That's what you're asking.
Interesting. Yeah, because it seems like the only option with the whole trans thing is like either we advocate for the acceptance of trans people or we advocate for the, I mean, are you in favor of if you think somebody is doing something that's harmful to them, then the government should seek them out and try to prevent them from doing that thing? Like, do you believe if someone's suicidal, they should be Baker-acted for a few days to determine whether or not they're like a danger to themselves or others?
No, certainly not. Although I do think we're kind of moving now to a very different. I mean, I feel like because the reason to the bullying question, because that is just an empirical question.
Sure,
we could talk about this as well, but this feels like two different things to me.
The reason why I bring it up is because it's very relevant. The argument about whether or not you would advocate for trans people to be put through essentially conversion therapy to make them not trans anymore, not want to be trans anymore. It just like that's the only other solution, it seems, right? Like or to advocate for one of these options, right? Either it's like trans people are valid and they ought to be let in society, or trans people are hurting themselves by being trans, or whatever like the argument would be. And I would assume most people who are in favor of some sort of government action on the part of preventing people from doing things that could be self-destructive or harmful to others, you would think the natural step then, if you believe that about trans people, would be maybe it is time to start rounding up trans people and sending them to be like sort of to go through conversion therapy, because that was a popular idea back when people believed essentially everything that I've heard transphobes argue about trans people, say the exact same things about gay people back in the day. The same talking points, from the they're a danger to our children and they're more likely to be pedophiles, to the argument that they're suicidal and they're hurting themselves and this lifestyle is hurting them. You know, what worries me in particular is that there are so many lines of similarity between the trans acceptance movement and the gay acceptance movement, you know, as it's been for the last few decades. So similar. And the rhetoric on the opposite side, the opposing side of these movements, sounds almost identical as well. Just replace a few words, and you basically have it.
Sure. I mean, that's again, like, yeah, there's narrative similarity, and that's whatever. I mean, I'm fine with if I sound like you could also make similar arguments against gay people. That's not gonna deeply bother me or something like that. Or there's some rhetorical similarity. Also, with respect to like the state doing things, I mean, I'll just to be clear, my actual political position here is that people who have sort of transgender feelings should be encouraged to fight that desire that they have, and B, try to live with the desire in a way that minimizes it. But that's very much a social encouraging, and obviously the government should not force them to do that or to not transition or something like that. Just to be clear, because you were saying some weird things that might lead people to think I have a political position that I very much don't.
Okay, I just, because I don't know how authoritarian you are with your politics. For all I know, you could just be like more libertarian with things, and you're just making an argument about how people ought to behave socially. But you could also be making an argument, I mean, very easily, if you were more authoritarian, that this is the case, and I think that the government should enact power in order to act on what I believe is true. And that's more so what I was concerned about. I didn't know how authoritarian you are. But yeah, even if that doesn't apply to you, it applies to people that I've talked to before, so that's why I brought it up. I guess I'll let you take the lead of the convo and talk about, because I don't have anything else to go from you. I'll let you go.
Sure. So returning to the bullying thing, I guess I just want to. I mean, there are two things I guess to say about the bullying. Firstly, keeping in mind this is empirically distinct from studies of social support, that most of the effect you normally see, where you see that people who are bullied have elevated suicide rates, just in the general population, that this is mostly due to a whole suite of confounding factors, and that if you control for especially things having to do with the within family environment and genes, that if you control for these things, that the effect size ends up being about 40% of what it's normally reported to be. But that even without doing those, and I know to my knowledge, studies on trans people that take into account those sorts of confounding variables, but even not doing that, the effect sizes for bullying, again, they're real, but they're just not anywhere big enough. And it's not like an opinion, it's just the numbers are what they are, that they're not big enough to get you anywhere near the rate of suicide attempt among trans people. And so I don't see how you're going to get around calling that an unexplained gap. And to me, that looks like a decent reason to prefer, if there's a way out of it, to not go into some behavior if you have, for reasons you aren't sure of, massively elevated suicide rates among people who do that.
I mean, it just seems like the thing that makes the suicide rates massively de-elevate has to do, particularly when it comes with like trans people, has to do with the more accepted they are and the more they're allowed to transition, right? I mean, I'm looking at a study right now that suggests 80% of individuals reported significant improvement in their dysphoria after sexual reassignment surgery. 78% of individuals reported significant improvement in their psychological symptoms, while 72% of individuals reported significant improvement in sexual function. Granted, this is a question of actual like patients receiving treatment, but I mean, the only way you collect that kind of data on mental health is by asking those people questions. Ask them, do you feel better? Do you feel like things are getting better? And that's how you collect that data. I mean, like, every time I see studies about this, I mean, like, right here is a giant
Sygt
Cornell
dårlig måde at få data på.
meta analysis, like a collection of like a super meta analysis, a collection of so many studies they had to add meta twice. That affirms that 56 of the 56 studies that were looked at, 52 indicated transitioning has a positive effect on the mental health of transgender people, and 4 indicate it had mixed or no results, while 0 studies indicated that trans people transitioning has negative results. And this is from Cornell EDU. Like, these are not, like, I don't know if you would argue they're like corrupted institutions that are pushing out bad data that's influenced by certain political ideologies, but I mean, it just seems like there's this overwhelming wave of evidence on the pro-trans side of things, and that overwhelming wave of evidence has also coincided with a broader societal acceptance of trans people as well. So it seems really bizarre to me when people say, no, it's not bullying and lack of support that's causing LGBT people to have such high suicide rates. It's actually unaccounted for factors that we can't know. It's a gap that we can't really put a label on, even though these studies suggest it's bullying and lack of support.
Knowledge of the caps?
Okay, so I mean, there are a few things to say. Firstly, a lot of the research, all the research that I've talked about so far has been based on suicidal ideation, or preferably suicide attempts, as the dependent variable of the outcome. And there's a good reason for that, that because we can't do randomized control trials on things like transitioning, I mean, there's a deep problem with going to someone who voluntarily chose to do a thing and asking them, hey, since you did that thing, do you feel happier? Yeah. Outside of the trans context, so this is just something just in general sort of behavioral psychology, that people have a bias for saying, yeah, the thing I did was good once they did it. And so for that reason, now if it was the case that that's all the data we had, that would be one thing. But it's not. And so if you look at the data and you say, oh, well, that's interesting. These people who transition, they say that they have are happier because of it or since then. But the people who have transitioned have higher rates of suicide attempts than those who have not. And to me, the most reasonable interpretation of that data is that the self-reported emotional states lack a certain degree of validity.
But the problem is the only study I've seen that suggests that trans people who've been able to transition have a higher suicide rate than trans people who haven't been able to is actually a study that compares trans people who've transitioned to cis people who aren't trans. That's the only study I've seen from anybody. I've debated, listen, I've been doing this for 2.5 years. I've debated like 100 people on this topic, and every single one of them that has made that argument put forward that specific study. So, I mean, if you please, like on Twitter, if you want to DM me that study that you're referring to, I'll check it out off stream. I want to see that study if it suggests what you're saying it does. But I haven't seen, I mean, I do scour the internet for sources that tried to debunk this position. Like, I've looked around. I haven't seen any such study as the one you're describing. But right now, I'm providing you with named, well-recognized, well-respected, large academic associations and organizations that have not only collected this data and done studies on these topics that have had the desired conclusions, but I've referenced meta-analyses of dozens of studies that have taken into account all this data and still had the same conclusion. 0 of these studies were found to have negative impacts for transitioning on trans people. You could argue that maybe that sounds fishy, or it could literally just be, just like with gay people, being able to live their best lives and do as they wish and being accepted by society just makes them happier. It could literally just be that simple.
So I feel like I'm just going to repeat myself. I have a specific methodological critique of the sort of research that's being cited. Obviously, like we said, you can't read a bunch of studies live, but I'm also literally referencing dozens of studies. But I feel like this is ground we've already covered, and we're kind of going in a circle. I guess I should add, like, I don't care about the authority of like Yale or whatever, but that's a totally different topic. And I should just, for the record, state that I kind of discount the kind of credentialism.
Well, as for like the appeals to authority, I don't believe that I, as a random dude on the internet, have the authority or the qualifications to look at data or conduct a study or an experiment and collect that data and synthesize it and figure out what that data means, as it does take a pretty good education to look at data and actually make that into something, right? Like data on its own is pretty useless. You need people that have fairly good understandings of what's going on with a particular subject that's being studied in order to make that data even mean anything. For me to like suggest like here is Cornell University or Cornell EDU, drop an enormous meta-analysis with like 56 trans studies, and here's the conclusion. And I don't trust myself to question these sources, because these sources have people with way better educations and way more experience and way more knowledge than I ever could as just some rando on the internet. So I kind of have to trust them, because for me, being just some rando trying to poke holes in their studies and their data, I don't even have close to the amount of information as they have. It would be folly for me to try to do something like that. It would be stupid of me.
Okay, sure. So I guess there are a few different things to say. Firstly, well, you may have some a priori suspicion about your own ability to understand what's going on if you read the study and or the paper, and it's talking about self-reported emotional states, and you can easily think of a problem with that. I think that then it just turns out that you actually can think of a critique of it, and that's not really a problem. In the second place, I guess we can just talk about this directly. I mean, I have no respect for these people. You're right that it takes a certain level of knowledge in order to accurately interpret and assess data. There's a huge literature in the social science. Most PhD social scientists do not have this understanding. If you give them quizzes on the exact meaning of things like p-value, confidence interval, this sort of thing, very, very basic freshman statistical things, that the majority of them can't even correctly define these terms, let alone...
I'm so sorry. I can't believe that the majority of social scientists can't even define basic terms when it comes to collecting data. Social science, that is the field that's all about collecting data to make inferences about society and how people work. That's what that's all about. Like the whole study of social sciences, that's all about, all right, we collect data about people, we gather it, we interpret it, and we come to conclusions about people from that, right? Like that's literally the whole field. I cannot... Like I feel like our society would crumble if that was true. Like I feel like our bridges and our houses would be literally crumbling into rubble right now if that was true.
So I mean, what I would say is just that within social science, this has been talked about for a long time. There are many studies showing this going back decades. Within every social science, there's a subfield of it normally that focuses on research methodology, and within that community, this, as far as I know, there's no controversy about this. There are studies going both ways. There's just a long list of studies showing lots of different professions. Psychologists are the ones most commonly looked at, but you also have ones on epidemiologists, on other sorts of social scientists, private sector people with social science degrees, even ones teaching statistical classes in statistics, that they would get basically F's on tests, trying to understand, again, very basic things that are in virtually all the data that they report. And I agree that it's like surprising in some sense that this is true, but it just is true. And the other thing I should say about they're talking about the meta-analysis and whatnot, and we should also remember that a meta-analysis, we shouldn't put too much stock in it. If you compare the results of a meta-analysis to the results of a pre-registered replication study, the effect size in the meta-analysis tends to be about 3 times larger, even when you do most of the normal ways that meta-analysis will adjust replication bias, suggesting that this sort of methodology actually tends to lead to a quite significant degree of error. But anyway, I feel like we're kind of moving into a different topic now about trusted experts, but it's a fine topic, so I guess...
I can't do the trusted experts topic because you're making the argument that the entire sociological sphere here in America, at least, I don't know if what you said applies to other countries or whatever, but are the whole field is apparently a sham, I guess. Like there's been no actual, are they all cheating? Is the study of social sciences and statistics, I'm pretty sure, to get a sociology degree, I'm pretty sure you have to take a statistics class, or I think statistics is a big part of it. Are they all cheating? is the class, are all the sociology classes, or almost all of them, not sufficient? Because I'm trying to imagine how what you're saying right now could possibly be true, and like the circumstances that would have to occur for this to actually be true would actually be like, this would be one of the biggest conspiracies in this nation's history if you could prove this true.
Sure. So I mean, there, in terms of how it happens, there are a few things to say. One, a lot of people go into social sciences and they have the research methodology classes, and those are the classes that they kind of barely get buy-in. Two, a lot of research classes are taught by people who themselves don't really understand what's going on. Again, there are specifically studies giving quizzes to people that teach statistics, and they tend to find, especially in social science departments, they tend to find similar results. And thirdly, a lot of the people in social science, my suspicion is, don't deeply care about the quantitative side, and because of this forget the meaning of the numbers that they're using, which is quite shameful. But I don't know of a better explanation for how it is. I mean, it's just a random one. It's just a classic paper in this literature from 1993 given to about 500 psychologists, given a quiz concerning common statistical issues dealt with in psychological research. Specifically, the psychologists answered on average 55% of the questions correctly, which is an F, right? And there's a long list of studies like this in different professions. I mean, this is just a thing. It's been talked about for decades. It's a problem that in social science, it's just a minority of people that actually know what the numbers mean, and most of them don't.
That sounds really bizarre to me. Are you sure you're not like referring to peer review and the scientific method, where the whole argument is when you have a theory, you put it through the ringer and you get it peer reviewed, and you have other people like that might disagree, or who might not be able to repeat the evidence? Like, I'm not sure.
No.
The discourse in the scientific community is what you're talking about here, because like what you're describing to me right now sounds crazy. Like, I don't want to sound rude, but it sounds crazy to me.
No, I mean, we could. There's lots of research on the problematic nature of the peer review process, but that's a distinct thing. I'm talking about, like I said, researchers not understanding exactly what fundamental metrics and statistics even mean, saying stupid shit like that a p-value, if you're finding as a p-value of 0.03, that means that there's a 3% chance that it's wrong or something like that.
So, do you believe that when it comes to statistics, that you are more qualified to look at statistics, raw stats, numbers, etc., and come to a conclusion from them than like sociologists are, or most in the sociological field are?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. Just curious. All right.
But that, I want to reiterate though that that's just because I can see the quizzes that they're getting, and it's not because I'm a genius. It's just because for whatever reason, I don't have sufficient caring to actually remember what these things mean, because it's not super complicated to know exactly what a p-value means. But like a dozen studies have shown us that lots of academics don't. That's just the state of affairs. I didn't make it that way. The papers saying this aren't like from some weird think tank. They're just in normal peer-reviewed journals. Like I said, this has been talked about for decades. It's not even like a secret. It's not a right-wing thing. I've never even heard this talked about particularly on like a right-wing source or something. This is just something that people in research communities talk about. It's just
it is
I don't know what to say.
What it is.
They don't know, probably because they don't care.
Okay. All right, I guess. Do you want to like move on to the next?
Det er fucking hilarious. Though.
All right. Yeah, sure. I don't even know what that is.
I mean,
yeah, you wrote them down at some point, so you
yeah. I mean, I wrote them, so I guess we can talk about it. I mean, the next thing on the list is rapid onset gender dysphoria. We can talk about that for a minute if you want.
Oh, sure. And you were upset because there's a paper that used that I think popularized that phrase.
Yeah.
That is based on the reports of parents, and it's from a forum, and you were saying it was like a turf forum. I've heard people say that there was like a political quiz on the forum, and most of the people were like pro some kind of LGBT liberal thing, but I don't know exactly what the political orientation of the people.
The forum in particular that data comes from, I believe, has like it's one of those forums that like you can hear the name of it and you're like, oh, okay, it's like Protect Women or like Women's Fight Against Gender Activism. It had a name like that, like a name that Mumsnet. It was was it Mumsnet? Really? Yeah, it was Mumsnet, which is a pretty well known like TERF website. Graham Linehan recently, like they hate men there. That's a huge part of it. I'm not sure if you're super aware of the TERF thing. Basically, in the trans community, there's a disdain for a group of people who I would argue appropriate the label of feminist called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists. These TERFs have a seething hatred for men. I mean, I'm not even kidding. Like, if you think you've seen man-hating feminists on any video or forum or Twitter, you will have your mind absolutely blown. These fucking TERFs genuinely believe that every man wants to like rape them or whatever. It is bizarre. So basically, these TERF forums such as Mumsnet, which is the one I'm talking about specifically, this is where the rapid onset gender dysphoria thing came from, and this is the forum where I believe that particular poll was done.
Yeah, sure. And in my opening statement, I didn't like reference that specific paper. To my knowledge, there's not a lot of data on this. I'm actually only aware of 2 papers directly trying to look at this, and they're both of quite low quality, and then that's one of them. So what I would say though is that we're seeing a rise in the number of people identifying as transgender with time. Mm-hmm. Seems to be concentrated in particular demographic groups, and that it would not be shocking if there was some degree of peer influence on that psychological state. There's peer influence on lots of psychological states and desires. But my position is definitely not that the data has come in.
Hvis du der, så hopper jeg lige af. Jeg skal lige tjekke min... Jeg skal lige tjekke min disconnect.
Data has not come in that we don't know.
Om jeg kan...
Nothing about the trends we're seeing makes it implausible that would be so.
Om den hopper på mit hotspot med det samme. Hvis det er, jeg mister internet. Fordi hvis jeg dør til fucking DC igen.
So I'd suggest that this is what the studies tend to suggest as an explanation.
Det var den værste F, jeg nogensinde har fået i mit liv. Så jeg skal lige se, hvis jeg tager mit internet, og den så hopper direkte på hotspottet, og jeg stadig kan spille. Så det vil være absurd nice. Også lidt irriterende, at jeg så død til, men stadigvæk. Så min stream, det cutter lige her.